At night, in a city, there is a woman at home with her child. A strange man comes to her door. She is frightened and calls the police. This is the police recording of that phone call. It is frightening and real.
Police department.
The man is trying to break in my door. I don't know who he is. He said let me in.
He's doing what?
He's trying to break in my door.
What is your address?
Training.
What's your name, ma'am?
Karen.
Karen? I want you to stay on the telephone. Okay?
Okay.
Where are you now?
I locked the front door and I'm upstairs in the bedroom.
Is there anyone with you?
No, just my baby.
Karen, are you still there?
He's in the house. He broke through the door.
He broke in. Karen, are you still there?
Uh-huh.
Shut the bedroom door. Lock it if you can and come right back to the phone.
He's at the door.
What?
He's at the door. He's here. He's here.
Are you still with me?
Uh-huh.
Tell him you've got the police on the phone.
I've got the police on the phone. Who are you? Why are you here?
He's in the bedroom with her.
I've got the police on the phone. I've got the police on the phone. Why are you here? Why are you here? Why?
Karen? Karen?
The woman on the phone was raped, and the terror that she experienced that night is the kind that most women fear. The stranger who grabs you on a dark street, in a parking lot, or breaks into your home in the middle of the night. But there is another man who poses even a greater threat. He's not a stranger, he's a boyfriend, a date, a man you work with, the man who lives next door. If you are one of the nearly 1 million women who'll be raped this coming year, the chances are at least 50% and probably greater that the rapist will be someone you know. According to the FBI, there were 85,000 rapes reported in 1985. But every rape expert in America agrees that rape is the most underreported of all violent crime. And most agree that for every victim who calls the police, there are at least 10, perhaps 20 other women who've been raped but don't call the police for months or even years. Many of them tell no one. Over half of these women are raped by an acquaintance, by someone they know. He is a boyfriend, an ex-lover, a friend of a friend, a classmate, a neighbor, a colleague at work, which sounds like the crime might be less terrifying. But friend or stranger, rape is still rape. For most women, the most frightening event in their lives.
This kind of criminal violence is different from all other criminal violence because the intent of the criminal is to hurt the victim. It's not to get money. It's not for some financial gain. It's not someone who wants your property.
It is personal.
It's a personal attack. And there is nothing more devastating to a person than to live through being powerless at the hands of another person. When people see documentaries and read about rape and read stories in the newspaper, they're horrified. They can feel the horror of being raped, but you can't know the terror of being in that powerless position unless you've been there.
She's been there. One night in June 1982, Wendy Kruptispane's former boyfriend broke through the front door of her apartment and begged her to come back to him. She was 26 years old, a flight attendant. He was an airline pilot, divorced, the father of 3 children. He had been drinking. They argued, and then he dragged her upstairs.
He grabbed me by my hair. I had long hair at the time. Pulled me upstairs and pulled out a chunk of my hair up here at a bald spot. When I tripped, because he was pulling me up the stairs so fast, I tripped and I fell down on the stairs, and I screamed as loud as I could, and he grabbed my face and sat on me on the steps, and I really thought I was going to die. It was just awful. He got undressed, and he tore my nightgown off of me and threw me on the bed again, and this time he sat on top of my chest, and he weighed about 230 pounds, and I weigh about 105 pounds. And I couldn't budge him. He pinned me down on the bed, and if he would hold my hands down, and if I moved, he'd bite me. And so I quit fighting on that because I was really afraid of getting hurt worse. And he forced sex on me, and the worst part was while he was doing all this, he was laughing, and it was so humiliating. And he's telling me that I like this, and this is what I deserved for breaking up the relationship and all this kind of stuff.
She was an attractive 22-year-old woman. By the next morning, after he left, she had a dislocated jaw, a sprained neck, bruises and welts all over her body. That morning, she called the police to report the assault, but not the rape.
I didn't know I was raped at that time. I didn't think that if you knew the person, you could call it rape. And I also didn't think anybody believed me. I was so embarrassed. I thought that everybody would blame me. Since I had selected this guy to have a relationship with, if I'd known him, I should have been able to talk him out of it. I mean, I really believed I could have done that and didn't. I mean, I couldn't. I didn't think anybody believed me.
As it turns out, the jury didn't believe her. The man was charged with rape, false imprisonment, aggravated sodomy. He was convicted of sodomy and simple battery. The jury didn't believe the rape. He was sentenced to a year in prison, but he left town and hasn't been seen or heard from since. And Wendy's sentence? 3 years of nightmares, depression, and constant fear. She cut her hair so it could never again be used against her. She moved to the woods, bought a gun, and surrounded herself with dogs. Almost every day and every night for 3.5 years, she has been raped again. In her nightmares, in her memory.
Well, I thought I was going crazy. I would go into these real deep depressions. I'd start to cry for no reason at all. I'd be walking through a store. I'd walk through, a drugstore and just start to cry. That would happen all the time, and I wouldn't know when it was coming, and I wouldn't know exactly why it was coming. I didn't see any triggers to it, and I thought I was going crazy. I wanted to commit suicide, and one time my husband's taken the gun out of my hand.
Would you have killed yourself?
That time I think I would have.
It is hard to imagine, to really understand just how painful, how devastating rape can be. No less so because the man is someone she knows. Perhaps the best you and I can do is listen to what they say, and listen well.
I thought, I'm 51 years old. I have 4 children, and I can't judge character any better than this. And I had people say to me, this was the man you dated? And I could hear it in their voice, like, what kind of judgment do you have? What did you do, pick him up at a bar?
I felt very suicidal at one time because I could not relax. I just could not get any peace at all. Things that used to make me happy didn't make me happy anymore.
I think I'll always have the nightmares about it, and I think I'll always...
Do you still have nightmares?
Oh, yeah.
What happens?
A lot. It's pretty much a replay of what actually happened. That feeling that I'm going to die.
My life is never going to be the same. I feel wrecked. I feel so violated that I didn't know then if I would ever be able to shake that feeling. And now it's 16 months later and I still think of it every day.
It's still there. I dream about it every once in a while, which sends me into a week of doing anything I can not to go to sleep.
Why?
Because I don't want to see it. Because I see his face. And it's like being there. Because it's 8 years ago and it should be gone.
There are things in my life that are still upside down. I don't know about dating. I'm frightened to death. Most women are scared of men on the street, men they don't know. I'm scared of men on the street and men I do know. I don't know if I'm safe with any man.
These women are in the greatest danger, are the most vulnerable to acquaintance rape. Students, high school girls, and college women. Dr. Mary Koss is a psychology professor at Kent State University in Ohio. She recently completed a survey of over 6,000 students at colleges and universities all over America. It is the largest study of its kind ever done, and her results are startling.
About 15% since their 14th birthday have had an experience that would legally qualify as rape. And an additional 12% have had an experience that would legally qualify as attempted rape. So when you spell out the parameters of the problem, you're getting up to 27%, or almost one college woman in 3 has been, up to this point in her life already, a victim of rape or attempted rape.
It seems unbelievable, doesn't it? 27% translates into millions of women, which means that rape and attempted rape is far more common and a far greater threat than most of us have ever imagined. What's more, Dr. Koss says 84% of the victims knew the man who raped them. Over half were raped while on a date. And for high school girls, it seems, the threat is just as great.
Acquaintance rape is more prevalent among teenagers than any other age group. In fact, teenagers are at higher risk for rape than any other age group.
13, 14, 15 years old?
Yes. The most vulnerable age group for rape is 15 to 19 years old. And they also are the most silent of all crime victims. They tend to be the lowest reporters of crime.
The crime against her was never reported to the police. It was 10 years ago. Lisa Hartwig was 14 years old. She was out on a date with a 17-year-old boy she had known for 3 months.
We went to a party, and on the way home, about 11 o'clock, it was night out, and it was during this blizzard. He drove out into the woods and raped me in the car. He had a knife and he had a gun. And I couldn't leave. There was miles of this barren land. It was during a blizzard, and he had this gun on me and was threatening me. And to fight back would have been very stupid. So it's hard for me to say how long that went on. I could probably say that went on for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And he drove me home.
For most of the past 10 years, she has been ashamed to talk about the rape. For most of those years, she believed it was her fault, that she should have struggled more, even at the risk of her life, that somehow she should have known not to trust that boy. What's more, what's worse, for 10 years, she has been afraid. Every morning when she wakes up, she is frightened. Every stranger, every man, every noise, every dark corner is a potential threat. Today, a decade later, when she goes to work, there's a knife in her purse. In her mind, there's always a plan. What to do if she's ever threatened again.
If I go out and catch a bus and a man jumps out of the bush, what am I going to do? If I'm at the Coke machine at work and someone pops out of a door, who am I going to go to first? Where am I going to knock on the door? What am I going to do? Every part of my life has these little plans, these little game plans. What if this happens? How will I react? What will I do?
The world sounds like a threatening place.
Very. It's very threatening. I don't trust very many people at all. Men are really are hard for me.
Every rape victim I've interviewed said the same thing. Months, even years after the rape, relationships with men, sexual relations, were at best awkward, at worst terrifying. Lynn Medford was raped 4 years ago by a college classmate, and today she wonders if she'll ever be married.
It will be something that will be with me for the rest of my life. I hope that the man that I do marry will be loving and gentle and kind and can go through this with me, but I don't know if I'll ever get to that point.
To the point of being married?
Yeah. I can't go on a date. How can you get married?
Wendy Kruptespain was raped 3.5 years ago. 2 years ago, she was married.
Even when we were married, I would have flashes. We'd be making love, and I'd have this flash of him turning on me and slapping me in the face. It'd be real brief flash, nevertheless terrifying, and it would just halt everything that was happening, and I'd start to cry and get hysterical.
Denise was raped a year ago by the brother of a high school friend. The effect on her?
Fear. Men. I'm scared.
Diane was in her junior year at a small college in Minnesota. On November 3rd, 1984, she went to a homecoming party at a friend's house. 5 of the 6 men who lived there, including her date, were fellow students and classmates. Sometime after midnight, she was taken to a room, and for 3 hours, 6 men raped and sexually abused her, while 3 other men watched and helped hold her down.
At the end of the night, my arms from here up to here were just beet red, and they had grip marks all over them because they were holding me down and stuff. And at like 2 times, or at sometimes, they would have 2 guys piled on top of me. So there was never a time, I don't think, when there was less than 2 guys on the bed. Sometimes there were 3 or 4, I think, piled on top of me and holding me down. And they would take turns holding down my legs and my arms, and then other guys would do stuff. And I dream about it, and I think about it a lot. And sometimes when I'm sitting there, I'll go to the library and study, or I'll be doing something, and everybody's back to normal on campus, and they're all happy and stuff, and just think, this isn't fair. You guys have this normal life now, and I'm stuck here sitting thinking about this over and over, and I don't know how to get it out of my head. You know, they say it takes time, but I wonder how long it's going to take, because I keep thinking about it, and just goes around and around, and people say, like a year later, they say, just forget about it. Why can't you just leave dead dogs lie? A lot of people said that. You're done and over with it, just go on with your life. But it's not that easy.
It's not easy, but why? Why is rape so frightening and so powerful? How can that physical encounter cause such pain that lasts for so long? What is it about that one night, a few hours, a few minutes, that can haunt a woman with nightmares and tears, months, years, even decades after the event? And it's not just Diane. Most rape victims say that after a while, their friends and family don't offer much sympathy anymore. Instead, they say to the victim, the rape happened a long time ago. It's time you were over it. It's time you got on with your life.
You know, I guess that's because a lot of people have a tendency to look at rape as being sex. And so especially, say, with the married woman, they say, what's the big deal about rape? I mean, you have sex all the time with your husband, so what's the big deal? So you had sex with some guy who wasn't so nice. Big deal. Didn't hurt you, did it? And what they don't realize is that women don't view rape as sex. It is a violent act. It bears no relation to the act of sexual intercourse at all. It's an intrusion upon your personal space and privacy over which you have no control, during which many women fear for their lives. Even when it's your boyfriend, he's acting so crazy, you know, you think maybe he took some drugs or he could kill me.
That's the fear that is so difficult to forget. Boyfriend, date, next-door neighbor, it doesn't matter. Most victims say they thought they were going to die.
I know that when I first started doing this work, one of the most striking things that I found in every victim I talked to was that every one of them said, I really thought he was going to kill me. And when you are doing treatment, it is true that the most traumatic aspect of the event is not the sexual violation. It really is the confrontation with death at the hands of another person.
Pretty powerful.
Very powerful.
A party, a nightclub, a disco, a bar. This is where the game is played, though some might call it a war. For most men, of course, meeting women, talking, getting to know them is innocent enough and fun. But there are some who come here with a plan. The woman they select, the soft things they say, the drinks they buy are all premeditated, all done by design.
You were driving?
Mm-hmm. I'd drive.
You'd get her a little bit drunk?
Most of the time a lot drunk.
And then what would happen?
I'd try to talk him into leaving the bar or wherever we were at and going for a drive.
Bob is 33 years old. He's raped 10 different women, all of them he knew or was getting to know. For him, typically, the rape begins when he walks into a bar. He finds a woman, drinks and talks with her, and then promises anything to get the woman to go for a drive in his car.
And a lot of times they wouldn't go for it. They wanted to go home, so I'd say, well, what about my place? Or do you live alone? You know, I'd be setting the whole thing up the whole way, asking them to try to plan on where I would take them to carry it out.
So you'd take them someplace, and what would happen?
Well, a lot of times if it was out in the woods, we'd just park the car and shut it down and turn on the radio and slide right over to them and just go right in to kissing and petting and things like that. There wouldn't be any conversation, or very little, I wouldn't say any, but they'd get the idea, and I'd come on real strong.
And they'd say no?
Most of the time they'd offer resistance. It wasn't always verbal. Some of them they'd just push me away and start crying. A couple of times they fought back pretty hard.
And what did you do?
And I just tell them, look, you're out here in the middle of nowhere. You know, it's now or later, but we're going to be here until I get what I want. Words to that effect.
Bob is an inmate at the Florida Treatment Center, a maximum security prison outside of Gainesville. He's one of 63 men in the sex offender program who are receiving therapy. They are among the small fraction of men who rape and get caught each year, but they are men nonetheless, and we can learn from them. All those I interviewed raped women they knew, but at the time, not one of them thought it was rape. Rick raped his sister-in-law one night. Despite her pleading and fighting back, he still didn't think it was rape.
Not as such, no. What my thoughts and my feelings and beliefs at that time was that, like, she wants this. She wants me to make love to her, you know, and I was looking at it as a making love instead of a rape, you know.
Paul is 22 years old, raped dozens of women that he knew or met at a party or a bar, and never called it rape.
At the time, no.
What did you think?
Well, you know, I thought, hey, I'm doing her a favor, she's going to do me a favor.
What was your favor?
My favor was taking them out, getting them high, and showing them a good time, you know. And I figured the best way to cap off a good time is with sex.
And they sort of owed you that?
Yeah. That was my half of the bargain. You know, that was what they were supposed to give me.
Even if they said no? Even if you had to physically force them?
Yeah.
What he's really saying, of course, and it's an old idea, is that this is a marketplace. A man's half of the bargain is dinner or drinks or tickets to a concert or movie. The woman in return has to offer first her company and then her body. And if all this sounds like an exaggeration, listen to these women, juniors and seniors at Kent State University in Ohio.
As soon as he puts out any money for you, you owe him sex.
What?
And that's just the way it seems. As soon as they start buying you beer, any kind of money is put towards you for whatever, then you owe it to him to have sex.
So often a guy feels like once he's opened his wallet and has paid for something for you, whether it be a beer or a cup of coffee.
Dinner, movie, whatever?
Whatever it seems to be, it's like, well, when I'm taking you home, then I'm going to get something, aren't I? I mean, whether it be sex or some heavy petting or whatever.
Of course, some might secretly ask, what's the problem? Is this really so terrible? If a man is generous, why shouldn't a woman be grateful? It's not romantic, but isn't it a fair exchange? But there is a problem. 1 million women get raped each year. One of the many reasons is that some men believe in this barter arrangement, or at very least use it as an excuse. This man did, and ended up raping his girlfriend.
When you said, I want to have sex with you, and she said no, you said you got very angry. Why?
I felt like she used me.
In what way?
Monetarily, you know, that sort of thing. You know, just use me for a place to stay, you know, and money and things like that.
And what's that got to do with having sex?
You know, it's a belief of mine. You know, it's kind of like they go hand in hand.
How?
You know, women are mostly material, and they only go after the material sort of things. And that's how they achieve them, is through using sex.
So if you give her money, give her a place to stay, then you're entitled to it.
Yeah.
Well, despite our misperceptions and the cruelty of rape, there's much that we can do. First, for women, the advice I heard was unanimous. Be aware, and then find a rape prevention program in your area that can teach the tactics and strategies that might prevent rape. Fighting, screaming, negotiating, and then practice what you learn so that if it ever happens, you'll be better prepared.
I know that you Gee.
What's more, and this may be the most difficult advice to follow, avoid getting into a dangerous situation in the first place. It's not easy, but Dr. Koss says if you sense something is wrong, it probably is. So don't deny your instincts, your intuition.
I think about this with myself because this is my work. And I know you go into a building at night and the elevator door opens and you can see a lone man standing in there. And all the rule books say, don't go into an elevator that has a lone man standing in there. You wait for the next one. And yet I can hear it in my own mind saying, that's so stupid. This guy's not going to do anything. You know, you can't run your life by fear. Just get in the elevator. And college women do that same thing. You know, this particular guy I'm with, he's not going to do anything. And, well, he's grabbing my arm kind of tightly, but I don't think he's going to go any further. Well, he's pinning me down on the bed now, but he's not going to rape me. And you have this process of denial that goes on.
Some of the women we've interviewed, Jackie Serena included, did have a sense before the rape that something was wrong. At the New Year's Eve party, Jackie noticed her date was getting loud and drunk and a little angry, and she remembers saying to herself,
I don't like this. I don't like this. This is another personality here, and I'm not comfortable with it. But again, I said to myself, it's New Year's Eve, he's had something to drink, and so that's the way it is. Then he started getting belligerent and telling people off, and I didn't like that. But he was still very nice to me.
So I tell women, be aware, and don't deny so long. To my mind, at the first sign that a guy is a person who mixes sex with violence, the guy who grabs your arm, the guy who kisses you and won't let your head back, won't let you get away when you want to, that's when I get out of the situation. Because that's your first clue. You know, you've got a guy who doesn't take no for an answer. You've got a guy who's not reading your cues that you're giving off. Don't mess with them.
For men, the most obvious advice I heard may also be the simplest.
When a woman says no, damn it, it means no. I don't care if you're married to her, if you've dated her and gone to bed with her 150 times. If this particular time or this particular position or this particular situation, she says no, it's no. And if she meant yes and said no, then that's her fault.
Beyond this, the advice I heard is only a little more complicated. We have to understand that rape and sex are different, and to confuse the two is a sure sign of immaturity and ignorance. Strong men, powerful men, are just the opposite in bed. They understand patience, listening, sharing. They've learned that good lovers don't rape, don't need to use force.
You know, I try to tell guys, you have to take the attitude that there is a lot to learn, and that sexual success is not scoring. That is an adolescent mentality. That mature sexual prowess in a man is someone who can take pleasure in creating an experience in which both partners can experience enjoyment and fulfillment. And that takes a lot of ability to communicate with your partner.
Sensitivity?
Sensitivity. And you don't develop those skills by one-night stands. You can have 300 scores and not know one thing about women.
Finally, this. While women need to know more about rape, need to learn the tactics and strategies that can prevent it, or at very least help them survive, the only real solution to the epidemic of rape will come from men, understanding themselves, teaching their children, talking to each other. Because, in the end, it's men who rape, it's men who can stop it.